What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you. Welcome to my channel, Alchemist 8. Justin here, and are you ready to work with these energies this month? Because you know what, October is a very interesting little month there. It's got some very neat pockets there. It starts off really nice with Mercury forming a square with Jupiter. There's real that kind of nice aspect there. Mercury will move into Scorpio, where things get a little, get a little intense and maybe a little more focused. There's this lovely little pocket of on the with Venus and Jupiter that's going to be happening, which we're going to need to carry us over because we got this tougher conversation between Venus and Saturn that's going to be happening. But Venus will shake it off because it's going to it'll enter to its domicile of Libra, where it'll feel balanced, blessed, beautiful. It'll carry that over into the Sun square with Jupiter, which again we'll need for the other hard aspect that's going to be happening between Mercury and Mars towards the middle end of the month there. New Moon in Libra is going to be happening. The Sun's going to be entering into Scorpio, which I just heard a bunch of Scorpios celebrating. I actually got to reach out to quite a few. And then it wraps up this month with this very interesting grand water trine that's going to be happening between Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn, and then Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. And then finally Mercury entering into Sagittarius there. So yeah, especially gets very busy towards the end of the month. And we'll get into all that here in a moment. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin. And one of the things that I do here is I talk about the Celestial News Monthly, which is a new format that I'm doing from the weekly one. And it just talks about where the sun and the other classical planets are going to be transiting for the month, what zodiac signs are going to be most impacted, and we, look at what houses you're going to have, and then how to most practically work with those energies. And yeah, and I'll just be going over all of that stuff here. But before I jump into that, if you want to help support the channel, I just created a Patreon not too long ago, and I have a podcast over there that I have a couple of tiers. One of them will give you access to the Lucky Day podcast, where I talk about the auspicious days for the month and what days to utilize for any sort of things that you're wanting to initiate. And then I have the second tier is for a personalized monthly transit report from me, where I'll record a video for you talking about the different transits that are going to be happening, and I'll also include a write up for that as well. And that'll be something that you'll get from me monthly as you're subscribed. So, and there is a link down in the description box for that if you want to check that out there for you there. So enough word salad. Let's go ahead and jump into this thing here. So here's the calendar for the month. And yeah, like I said, so just to kind of give kind of an overview there. On the first, Mercury is going to be forming a square with Big Papa, which is really kind of positive. We like whenever a planet's talking with the benefics. Then we have a full moon on the 6th in Aries on the 6th of October, and also on the same day Mercury is going to enter into Scorpio. So there's a lot of martial energy in that little little date there. That's going to be something to observe. Then there's this lovely little pocket between Venus and Big Papa. That's going to bring some benefits there, which I love that, and really milk that for all it's worth, because it's going to get a little bit tougher there as we move into the 11th, where Venus is going to be forming an opposition with Saturn, and so that's going to be some challenges maybe in some relationships and things like that. But Venus will power through this. We'll be able to hopefully talk through these things, and then Venus will move into Libra, into its domicile, where things are going to be just balanced, blessed, fantastic. We're really looking forward to Venus. I'm excited for Venus to enter into Libra. That's going to be really dope. Then we have the Sun forming a square with Jupiter. That's going to be a really nice aspect there. Again, Jupiter bringing in some beneficence, bringing in some union, some abundance, which again we're going to need, because then we got that Mercury Mars conjunction that's going to be happening on the 20th, and that's going to prove to be an interesting little pocket there. Yeah, that's going to be fascinating. Then that's going to end that lunar cycle pretty much, and then we get into, before we start up that was going to end up that Virgo lunar cycle before we start off the new lunar month with the new moon in Libra. So that'll be an interesting transition to observe in the collective. Then on the 23rd we enter into Scorpio season, where the sun moving into Scorpio, and then like I said, we have this at the end. There's this really nice grand water trine that's going to be happening, a lot of flow, especially in kind of that sort of like emotional sphere. It's just it gave me me this sort of like washer sort of feeling, or this like the water's churning. And I'll talk about that more as we kind of analyze those dates there. Yeah, but that's happening with Mercury and Mars, or Mercury on the 24th and 25th with Jupiter and Saturn respectively. And then the same thing's going to happen with Mars on the 28th and 29th, doing those same aspects. And then we end off with Mercury entering into Sagittarius and the mind getting more active there. So that gives you just like a brief overview of what's going to be happening there for the month. And keep in mind too, I'll have timestamps down in the description box there with all the different days for you, so you can jump to different days and just come back to this video as we kind of get closer to those times, just to get a feel for it, however you want to work with this content. But let's go ahead and let's get into the first one here, because on a Wednesday, starting out the month, the 1st of October, Mercury is going to be forming a square with Big Papa, and this is going to be happening at 22 degrees and 34 minutes. Mercury is in Libra and Jupiter is in Cancer. Now, when you think about the square aspect, if you're watching on the video here, I got a chart up there, but that's going to be reaching its exact point at about 1:59 p.m., and that's going to be Pacific time. And when you think about the squares, they are a bit more inharmonious when we're talking about that. There's some challenges that can come up with the square. But the nice thing is that it's a challenge with the benefic. So we love that. And the nice thing too is that not only is Jupiter in its exaltation here in Cancer, but it's overcoming Mercury in this instance. So what that can translate as in, this could be something where if there's anything that you're needing any sort of like help on, whether it's like assistance from someone, maybe you need to just borrow someone, whether it's like their time to help you maybe move something, or maybe you want to, maybe you have what Jupiter can bring about knowledge. So maybe there's a, maybe you want to learn a new language, or maybe you want to learn a new skill, whatever that is. This would be the time to reach out, to make that sort of initiative. Maybe you want to improve your health. So this could be, maybe you're thinking about talking with different groups and going to see what they can offer you. Maybe this is talking with the community. Maybe there's something that's happening there. Maybe you want to move. But Jupiter here is trying to bring some abundance, again, bringing gifts and inheritances, establishing that sense of trust, that faith that things can get better, and that there are more options than maybe we initially thought. And the kind of nice thing with this sort of pocket of energy too is that I think this really does, whenever Jupiter and Mercury are in conversation with one another, really promotes an abundant mindset. Because when you come from that place of plenty, that you have what you need, and that not just includes just like the actual things that you have, but think about the relationships that you have as well, and their things being an extension of you too. Not that we're just using people for that stuff, but those options are there, especially when we have good relationships, we're willing to give for others that we love and we care for. But it just creates so many more doors for us and so many more opportunities. Whereas if we come from this place of lack and things like that, then that just shrinks up things. And so that's something that I would pay attention to, try to really work with this. I think this could be a really nice way to kind of start the month there if you want to set any sort of, and this is cardinal energy that we're talking about here. So, setting any sort of like intentions for improvement and things like that would be, I think, really nice for this to kind of start off this month. And what I think really would be very beneficial is then it's like whatever thing that you're maybe wanting to start there, Mercury will be able to have that focus, really kind of hold that inspired feeling, because then on the 6th of October, Mercury is going to enter into Scorpio, and that's going to happen at about 9:40 a.m., and that'll be Pacific time. Now, when you think about Scorpio, they're traditionally ruled by Mars, and they're the fixed water sign, and they're receptive or yin in nature. And this would be it's more kind of like an internalized Mercury. Mercury is more observing, I think, when we get into Mercury in Scorpio. I think that there's a sharpness, a focus that comes there. So this could be great if you, especially taking those feelings, maybe that hopefully Jupiter was bringing, that sense of inspiration, that sense of maybe more of expansion, then you can take that and channel that into that energy, that feeling into the activities that you're doing, the things that you're researching, the conversations that you're having. This to me is one that I think allows for a deeper exploration of oneself. It helps you to access the kind of deeper recesses of the mind with Scorpio. There's again, there's a sharpness with Scorpio, and a sensitivity that's really strong there with Scorpio. And I think that this could even help the one thing that I would maybe be mindful of is just with Mercury's there is just being maybe a little too focused, maybe being overly obsessive, not allowing the mind a break. That's something to just kind of pay attention to, make sure that you eat in between things like that. But yeah, I think Mercury in Scorpio too, I think is a really great one just in general for maybe doing any sort of like therapy work, or any sort of like exploring just the deeper recesses of the mind. I think could be great. Really great for just like doing some really just deep exploratory journaling. I think could be something like that, just observing the thoughts, and not judging them or anything, but just paying attention to that type of stuff. Be mindful too, because again, Scorpio can really kind of hold things, so especially when we're dealing with kind of tougher emotions, that you want to pay attention to how that influences the mind and things like that. And this is something too where if you have a lot of fixed placements, that's going to be Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, or Leo, then Mercury is going to be working more personally with you. Those are going to be activating those points more. Like myself, I got a whole Leo stellium, and then I got Saturn in Aquarius, so that's going to be fun. And Mercury is my time lord. So, and that's something too to pay attention. What sign you have Scorpio in, or excuse me, not what sign, what sign you have Scorpio in, what house you have Scorpio in, because now that house is going to be something that's activated in as well there. So that's something to just kind of pay attention to as Mercury moves there. And also too, now that Mercury is in Scorpio, it's co-present with Mars, the ruler of Scorpio here. And so now that energy is really going to be starting to intensify as we move into the month there. So be mindful of any sort of like heated conversations, any sort of like anything along those lines, but we'll get into more of that here in a bit. Now let's focus on some loveliness here, because on Wednesday, the 8th of October, Venus is going to be forming a sextile with Big Papa, and that's going to happen at about 23 degrees and 18 minutes. Venus is in Virgo and Jupiter is in Cancer. This is really nice because when we think about the sextile energy, it's like the trine in that it's very harmonious, it's sympathetic, it's beneficial, the conversation that's being had, but it's just a little bit weaker than the trine. It's when the celestial bodies are 60 degrees apart from one another, and they just requires this initiative, but sextiles can create this sense of like collaboration, opportunities open up with that. It's the flow can be easy, so this is whenever we have especially easy and harmonious aspects with the benefics, we want to milk that for what it's worth. So this could be both Jupiter and Venus are affirming. They're wanting to bring people together. They just want, this just that they're that yes that we want. And so this could be an opportunity where, again, maybe this would be great for any sort of collaboration, whether this is for, and again, it doesn't have to just be anything creative with Venus, whatever it is that you happen to be interested in. This could be a great day for planning, some sort of like activity. Maybe just a couple friends meet up together, or maybe you just happen to have a nice phone call with someone there. With Venus in Virgo, even though Venus is in its fall in Virgo, this could be a way, how can I make my relationships more efficient? What are some things that I can improve? Maybe we just need to make adjust for more time here or something like that, whatever that's looking like. But it could be really just a great relationship kind of building energy here, or just an opportunity for you to bring in some more abundance, some more things that you desire, some more things that you love into your life, to kind of work that in, however that applies to you in your life. But this is a really nice pocket whenever the benefics are having this harmonious conversation. So definitely utilize that. And, finding people who can, just looking for people who, like-minded people, and like your things that you find interest, because then you can riff off of one another. There's this, it creates this, two minds are better than one, and, you can create, what comes from that can be really spectacular. So Just something to pay attention to, that little nice little loveliness there, because again we're going to need it because on a Saturday, the 11th of October, this is when things get our first harder aspect of the month. Venus is going to form an opposition with Saturn, and this is happening at 26 degrees and 59 minutes. Venus is in Virgo and Saturn is retrograde in Pisces. Now, as you see on the chart here, if you're watching, the opposition is where the planets are in opposing signs from one another. So there's adversity here, especially when we're talking about between a malefic. And it's an interesting thing. It's a very mixed bag, I think, with this energy, just because it's Venus, the lesser benefic, in Saturn, the greater malefic. Venus is not in a really strong position here in this, just because, like I said, Venus is in its sign of its fall right now. So this could be where Saturn, for example, could be showing where things are just not working. Where there's really kind of bringing up maybe even just like overly with Venus and Virgo. You know, we may know what we want to improve in relationships, but Saturn may be making that so that it's a bit more reactive, or that we're focusing more on the negatives than the positives. Instead of like, hey, I want us to improve this thing, it's like, why do you always do this, or why do you always do that? You tend to do this thing and that thing. The only reason we're not happy is because of such and such. And now that dialogue is creating this weirdness, is creating this tension there. It's kind of, Saturn is sullying the brightness that is Venus here. And so this would be, just in general, I think a great time to just kind of look at relationships, whether this be relationships with people that may be providing this, that may be slowing you down, that maybe, that just aren't, we're on different trajectories now. Or this could be, thinking about your relationship with just like, maybe there's a food, maybe it's with whatever this thing with your environment, how your spirituality. This could be with your career, looking at that relationship there. It's just like, is there something that's just not working anymore? There's something that's just not bringing me that sense of merriment. And this could be something too with Saturn. This could be where it's not necessarily that there's anything wrong with your craft. There just be maybe some just kind of external things that are just, this life may just be throwing some curveballs right now. And it may not be, because I think sometimes, for example, when we're struggling in one area, we can victimize, we can kind of project those sort of like emotions and frustrations onto other people, and kind of make them the enemy, and give the thing that we're feeling, that Saturn there, that maybe, I don't know necessarily that we necessarily want to face, but it comes out in other people in some type of way, and so this is another thing that could potentially come out, I think, in this too. This does feel like a secret's being revealed sort of thing, where, you're trying to keep something. I'm not quite sure what that could be. Like, you're trying to keep something hidden, for example, but then it comes to light. Like, it's just like, it's, that Venus in Virgo is discerning, and now we got Mercury in Scorpio that's kind of just picking on the things that aren't being said. Just something about that just feels, this could be some kind of like thing coming up in the news, possibly, like revealing some sort of like Venus dealing with money. Maybe there's something with finances that are going to be happening, or something as far as like with property. Venus can be about a newly acquired property and things. So, be receiving something, but there's like a caveat at the end of that. So it's a very interesting kind of opposition there that's happening with Venus and Saturn. And I think that it's, creates this kind of tug of war sometimes when we're thinking about that energy. So that would be just a day that I would just kind of be watching out for, and just kind of pay attention to just people's behavior in this period of time, and know that there may be something else that's going on behind the scenes. It may not be necessarily something wrong with you. And again, that's not to excuse people's behavior to, if the people like lash out or things, but it could just be something to just kind of keep in mind, like, oh, you know what, the energies are riled up. Let me give this person that space. Maybe you need some solitary time. And that might be something too with this opposition with Venus. You might be seeing where other people, like, you see people struggling in other relationships, and you're wanting to help them, but they're not feeling receptive to your help. And so that could be where it's just like, well, you got to let them be in confinement for a little bit to kind of process this thing here, to kind of Mercury and Scorpio to kind of help move through that, whatever emotions they might be going through. So just something to think about there. But next kind of thing there, this is actually, and this, what a contrast. When we get into Monday, the 13th of October, then Venus enters into Libra, and this is a real, this is a real statement. Even like just a little sidebar here, the day that happens, because that's going to happen at about 2:18 p.m. Pacific time, the Moon and Jupiter are actually forming that monthly conjunction that they have with one another, and it's happening where the Moon's at home and Jupiter's in its exaltation. So something about here, it's like Venus is making a statement where it's just like, you know what, things have been tough and now I'm here to smooth some stuff out. Because, the nice thing about with Venus entering into Libra, this is where the planet is in its domicile. And so it has all the resources that it needs to do the thing that Venus does well, which is creating relationships, creating harmony, creating balance, creating beauty, bringing in love, trying to just bring us all together in whatever capacity that's looking like there, to bring more gifts and things along those lines, and support that Venus is bringing. This is one where pay attention to. Now we want to look to see now Venus is activating the Libra portion of our chart and bringing beneficence there. So especially you want to see, especially this is going to be really nice if you have any sort of cardinal placements. That's going to be Libra, Capricorn, Aries, or Cancer. This is going to be a more active period for you. Venus is going to be activating more for you. But I would even pay attention to if you have any sort of like air placements, that's Gemini and Aquarius, and even like fire placements, that's Sagittarius and Leo. Like I said, I got a bunch of Leo placements. I'm looking at that one. Venus and Venus is my other time lord for the year, so I'm here for that. But yeah, Venus is doing some really nice stuff in Libra, and I think that this is, even though you have this that as you can see here, that Mercury Mars thing is growing, it's building, but yeah, Venus is not being, is not even being aspected or being seen by either of the malefics here. So Venus can just do its thing, and do it well. So I think that this is one where if we can try to lean into that Venusian energy to make more of an effort, to come from that place of understanding, of balance, of having that tactfulness. I think that Venus in Libra has, that to be able to, even when there are times of of disagreement and things like that, then we could at least, I may not agree with you, but at least I can understand where you're coming from, and then we'll just figure out where to go from there, how we operate. But yeah, very interesting. I mean, I'm very excited for when Venus enters into Libra. Now, when we get into Thursday, that's going to happen on the 16th of the Thursday, the 16th of October. Another nice kind of little aspect here. We have the Sun that's going to be forming a square with Jupiter, and this is happening at 24 degrees and 6 minutes. The Sun is in Libra, and Jupiter is in Cancer, and this is really great position, I think, for the Sun, because even though the Sun is technically in its fall in Libra, it's in the sign of a benefic where it's in its fall, so it still looks to Venus, who's now at home, who's providing this stuff for the Sun. And now the Sun, on top of that, is forming, like I said, forming a square with Jupiter. And this is happening at about, forming exact at about 10:42 p.m. Pacific time. And again, it's similar to like that Mercury and Jupiter square, where the Sun is the higher light of the mind. This is the thing that moves us, the soul light, So this can be I think, a really great time to just get in tune with yourself, with that square. See how, if you've been feeling out of alignment, if you've been feeling just off, this can be a great time to, okay, what do I need? Who do I need in order to brighten that light up inside of us, inside of you, whatever that might look like. This could be, the Sun could represent friends, and this could be an energy. If you were, let's say, around that opposition, maybe you were feeling a little more isolated, weren't wanting to deal with relationships, this could be a great time to put yourself back out there, just kind of reemerge, just like, hey, I was going through a dark night of the soul, the sun was setting, it was in the midnight hour, but now I'm rising again. So that could be really a really nice kind of support there with that Sun squaring Jupiter that day. So that would be another great day to just kind of do some do some nice things that just really kind of help you get in alignment, to feel like you're in your soul's calling, in a sense. I really kind of like that, and look at what are the things that are maybe challenging that growth, and what are some ways that you can help work that out. Maybe there's some new techniques and things that Jupiter can bring to help you to get through that. Maybe it's working through an addiction or whatever that might be. So yeah, there's just something there with that. Now the next trickiness, the other hard little pocket. On the 19th of October, that's going to be on a Sunday, we'll have that Mercury Mars conjunction, and that's going to be happening at 19 degrees and 11 minutes of Scorpio, and that's going to be at about 11:51 p.m. Pacific time. Now, the reason that this is, because let me start off with kind of the nice thing. Now, it's nice that Mars is in its home sign of Scorpio. That's really dope. So that kind of takes off the bite from Mars otherwise. But it's still, Mercury, which is more of a neutral planet, is fusing with the lesser malefic. And so when you think about those martial themes in the sign of Scorpio, it can be where we're talking about strong emotions that are coming through there. And this is stuff, Scorpio, it's going to be something where it's like it's going to have a hard time letting that go once it's been initiated. So that would be something that I would really kind of pay attention to, because this could be very sharp, very cutting kind of dialogue that could be happening. One that is just mean, could just be just straight up aggressive, angry, and this is just the least constructive of this energy. This could be obsessive. This could be, this could even feel like, imagine even like feelings of paranoia, feelings of being trapped, or there could be this agitation, and I think that it's just with Scorpio, if you don't manage that well, then it's just going to just rumble. I just imagine, like, when you agitate, like if you've ever seen what happens when you hit like a bee's nest, and then it's just chaos, and it's just like, and it's intense and it's angry. So that would be just something I would pay attention to. Find different ways to move through emotions, especially ones that you may tend to get stuck in. If there's anger, finding a punching bag, something to channel that into. That I find, sometimes it's not the best to always just sit still and to be in that. Sometimes you need to help that energy move. So like doing, maybe going to like a kickboxing class, or going for a run, going for a swim, maybe jumping in some cool water can help that kind of calm things down, help cool the mind off, or whatever that might look like. Again, I'm always a fan of just like, working with like maybe eating some bitter things, that could be another thing, like whether it be dark chocolate, or make yourself some, like maybe some St. John's wort tea. That's, what you can talk to your medical professionals about that one. But just something I think to think about there with the Mars, just on the negative aspect. But on the positive, Mars and Mercury, that's a very active mental energy. That's quick, and again, with Mars and Scorpio, that's focused. This can be a time where you can process a lot of information. I think that could be a really nice energy that's coming through there with this. that's coming through there with this. So just something to pay attention to, on the more kind of constructive end. But yeah, hostile conversations and things, that's something I would definitely avoid with this, because I could have some, things could just escalate really quickly, because Scorpio's not one, I find, a sign that would back down. It's like, I think the fixed signs, when they commit, it's like bet. So yeah, that's just something to consider there. Now, one thing I wanted to mention too, because it's like shortly after that's happening, on a Tuesday, the 21st of October, Mercury is going to enter its retrograde shadow, and that's going to be at 20 degrees and 42 minutes of Scorpio. And it's going to, now this is something to tune into, because this is going to be, Mercury's going to come back to this degree point at 1 days, and it enters that degree at about 4:11 a.m. Pacific time. But Mercury, the retrograde is not going to be happen until, when's that retrograde happening? It happens on the on the 9th of November, when that's going to be happening, and it's going to retrograde from 6 degrees of Sagittarius back to that 20 degrees of Scorpio. So I would tune in now, especially one, if Mercury is a time lord for you for the year, that retrograde is going to be more prominent in your chart. And I'm talking to myself included. But this is especially too, if the degrees that Mercury is going to be aspecting, if there are any planets or points on that. And again, that's going to be between 20 degrees of like kind of the late degrees of the fixed signs, 20 degrees of Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, and Leo, to that 6 degrees of Sagittarius. And I would pay attention to if you have any points around early Sag, Pisces, Gemini, or Virgo. So that retrograde is going to be more active, more energized, because that's going to be, squares and again oppositions that are going to be happening between that period there. So just kind of tune into that, get a feel for what houses that Mercury is going to be, where those themes are going to be activated from, where the kind of the communication, where the mind's going to be at. Because to be forewarned is to be forearmed, so you just be prepared for this. If it's going to happen anyway, let's just get ahead of it. Because listen, that's going to be nothing for me. That's going to be nothing but squares. Mercury's going to square my Mars 3 times. That's going to be annoying. That's going to square Venus, and let's see, he's going to oppose my moon. So, but now but then that gives me, again, just a heads up for that, in which I already kind of had eyes on this. I've had eyes on this for like a minute. The end of October has been a pretty active time. So, yeah, just just a little extra thing to tune into there. And then we get into the 22nd the 22nd of October, and the sun is going to enter into Scorpio. Oh, no, I think I said on the 23rd on the calendar. I'll have to fix that. But the sun entering into Scorpion here, that's going to happen at about 8:50 p.m. and that's going to be Pacific time, like literally like a second, a second before it changes. But yeah, with the sun in Scorpio, this to me is a great time again to be able to, when you think about the sun, that's the soul's light. And so this can be to be able to feel that on a really deep level. Look at all this Scorpio that we're in. When this is going down here, there's something with the sun and Scorpio that is just, I think, can really tune into one's self. If you really kind of, this would be a great one for doing like a time for like meditations and things. I think with the sun and Scorpio. And to be able to understand the things that you're moving through when you are tapping into that kind of higher light, what that being divinely guided feels like, when that intuitive side of you is guiding you. I think that's a really great one for the sun in Scorpio energy to kind of work in. But again, too, this is a time to look into where you got Scorpio placements, because now the sun is bringing light here. It's shining bright there in this house. And so this may even be a period of time where certain emotions may be starting to shine through a lot just brighter and a lot stronger. So just something to learn how to navigate as you're kind of feeling through this stuff with the sun entering into this Scorpio, as we go into Scorpio season. Which, we meet ourselves in doing this introspective work. This is really kind of carries over nicely into Friday, the 24th of October, because the Mercury is going to form a trine with Big Papa, and that's going to happen at 24 degrees and 37 minutes. Mercury in Scorpio and Jupiter in Jupiter in Cancer. Now, again, Jupiter's in the overcoming position, but now we have a trine, which is the most beneficial aspect here. Jupiter's really given when we're talking about the trine energy. And so, this would be a really great time doing things that help you feel abundant. This would be great energy for like affirmations, I would say. With that, this could be a great time for if you need any sort of like assistance in things. I think that again, Jupiter's affirming that, and really kind of, maybe when you're going to or how do I want to put this? It could be it can be a great one where like you go to ask someone for help, and then they do more than you expected. And there's like, even like in that there's like this deep bond that's had, because there's something interesting. Because right after, I'm going to kind of talk about these both at the same time here, since they're happening within about a day of each other. On Saturday the 25th, Mercury's going to finish up, complete that trine after forming with Jupiter's going to trine Saturn. And so this could, to me, is like if you with Jupiter. So Jupiter is, we're trying to initiate Cancer from this place of abundance, of growth, of trust, of faith. And then in with the Mercury and Scorpio, we're holding that energy, we're holding that feeling. And then Saturn, we're letting that feeling permeate, and it's creating these long lasting effects here. So this would be a great one for any sort of, I think that if you wanted to do, again, any sort of like corrective behaviors, maybe this is working on any sort of like vices or any sort of like habits that aren't promoting you, or anything along those lines. I think this would be a wonderful energy for that, to really wrap your mind around it, to make that a daily practice, to change how you're maybe even conversing with other people. That could be just little minor tweaks like that can have such long-term benefits. I think is what's happening with this water trine, with Mercury first. And then we get to the next one, which is going to be on the 27th. The 27th of October, on a Monday, Mars is going to form a trine with Big Papa, and this is happening at 24 degrees and 48 minutes, and it's going to reach exact at about 11:19 p.m. Now, this to me is like, now that we've got that process, that we've been thinking those things, now Mars is the doing those things. It's really putting action behind those feelings. It gives me that like a sense of a washing machine, and it's just like something is we're just trying to clean something up here, and try to really get something ready. It's like, it's a very cleansing energy. It's a very it gives me that feeling of being in the flow, just that if you've ever had those days where you're just like, you just feel on, whether it's like, you just have just the right thing to say at the right time, or just like, you just had like a really great, just real like creative session, or maybe you just end up writing a bunch, or just feeling really inspired. That's what this is giving me. There's just a sense of feeling really good, and I think it's something that can be, again, long term here, because on the last aspect that we're going to talk about, the 29th of October, first, Mercury is going to enter into Sagittarius, and that's what I have up here first. That's going to happen at about 4:02 a.m. Pacific time. Now, Mercury in Sag, this is where Mercury finds itself in its detriment. And that just means that it's the opposite from one of its home signs of Gemini. And so again, Mercury's not able, it's not that again the planets can't function, but it's just like a little outside of its element. It's in a foreign sign with Sagittarius. And what I think with Mercury and Sag, like this is, again, it's a very inspired energy. The mind is very active with Sag, because Sag is ruled by Big Papa. They're the mutable fire sign. They're active or yang in nature. So this is the feeling, the muse energy, feeling inspired, wanting to go on a quest, wanted to try all the things, talk to all the people and whatnot. But it's a fleeting energy, what I find with Mercury in Sagittarius. It's almost like, I heard of someone who has this placement. They described it as like a shooting star. It's like, which is beautiful in that moment, but just as quick as that thing comes, it goes. And so I would say, wow, there's this motivation there, because it's like Mercury's going to do this first, and then Mars is going to form that trine with Saturn. And that's going to happen at about 25 degrees and 54 minutes, Mars in Scorpio, Saturn in Pisces. And I think that it's interesting that Mars first, has that conversation with Jupiter, because there's the idea of expansion. This could be someone like presenting you an idea like, hey, like we have come, like, do this, join our group, or like, let's go on a daily run, or whatever that is. It's that getting that feeling, but now it's like making sure to have that follow through. Because I think that Mercury in Sagittarius can change its mind, and can be, wanting to do all of the things and spread itself too thin, kind of burn that fire out too quickly. So, I'd say this is when strike when the iron's hot. This is not a time to wait for inspiration. Even if you can't get to it, just write stuff down, and just see how it resonates with you later, how it sits with you. And this would be one where, again, to check to see, where you have, now that we have Mercury entering into a new sign here, it's Sagittarius, and it's not going to be there for too long. But while it's in that sign, if you have anything special around early Sag, in the early Sag, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo, then Mercury's going to be working more actively with you. But this is too to look to see where you have Sagittarius in your chart, what house that is, because now that the house is going to be activated as well. And again, Mercury's going to be going back and forth between between the Sagittarius and Scorpio sections of our charts there. That's going to be pretty active there. And so that's another thing to think about there. But I like how this period of time ends, and let's go ahead and switch over. But yeah, I like how this period of time ends. I think that it can be, again, this can start off a little challenging. Those aspects are, they're there. But, I think that how we move through those periods and how we let those emotions wash through us, how they flow through us is really going to, how we show up at the end of the month, I think really matters, and I think that there's a chance to, even in, the challenges that are coming, to get in a different type of flow, to evolve with these changes that are happening in our world here. So, but yeah, that's basically a rough kind of overview of the month there. So yeah, I hope you like that. Kind of a first installment there of this new thing. Oh, I totally did. I'll have to correct that. Yeah, just a little sidebar. Yeah, I definitely meant that Scorpio, Sun and Scorpio is moving on the 22nd. I'll have to fix that. But but yeah, otherwise, yeah, hopefully you found this helpful. And if this is something where, if you want to see how these aspects and these ingresses are affecting your natal chart more personally, again, down in the description box there's a link to book a consultation with me, so definitely check that out. And if you have any questions about the services that I provide, my email's down there as well, so definitely check that out. And if you want to get a breakdown of the month on a week-to-week basis, this is just to give just an overall view of the month. I go into each of this stuff weekly, but it goes from the view of the moon, and I talk about, and that's going to be on the Lunar Shenanigans, and there's a playlist tab down there, and it just talks about where, just talks about the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in when it happens to go void of course, and just to get a general feel of the energy for the week as the moon is having the different conversations with the other celestial bodies, and as it distributes the energies to us, since the moon is so the closest celestial body to us, and it heavily influences us just as a collective there. So it's really important to sync up with that good old moon. So that's an option for you there. But yeah, I think that's all I got for you there on this segment here. So until next time, stay mindful out there. Keep raising that vibration through the roof. And I will catch you on the next one. Later.